Yo, it's your homeboy Kurosagi in the building. Welcome to episode 34 of my One Piece discussion series. In this episode, we talk about Devil Fruit effectiveness in combat as well as Devil Fruit limitations. And this refers to Devil Fruit versus Devil Fruit combat. Before we continue, spoiler alert, if you're not up to date, be warned, you will have spoilers, nothing serious, but you have been warned nonetheless. So let's start. Assuming we have two characters, character A and character B. Neither have haki. Okay, just for simplicity, neither have haki. Both are equal strength in terms of martial arts, speed, physical strength, endurance, stamina, all that good stuff. The whole point is we have two characters that are equal. These two equal characters have devil fruits. No two devil fruits are the same. So for the most part, no two devil fruit are equal, or at least when faced off with each other. Therefore, the character with the better devil fruit should win. Hopefully, you guys follow where I'm going with this. There's basically uh two main factors I would say. The first is the limitations of the devil fruits. The second is the effectiveness of the devil fruit. I think I'll start with the limitations. Now, limitations apply to pretty much all devil fruits, but they're most important with the hacks ones because with the hacks ones it's really hard to think of simple ways in which these devil fruits can be defeated. In terms of I said limitations and effectiveness. In terms of effectiveness, it's a little easier to think of how effectiveness can play a part. But anyways, back to limitations. Now let's look at a bunch of relatively powerful or hacks devil fruits and their limitations slash effectiveness. I'll just anyways, let's just continue. First we have my homeboy Shichibukai Captain Buggy and his devil fruit, which lets him separate into pieces and float. He doesn't his body parts don't simply drop on the floor when he separates. He can float. He has two main limitations with his devil fruit. The first one is he can fly, but he can only fly a maximum distance. There is a maximum distance or a cap as to how far his body parts can be from his feet. And the second limitation is his feet must be on the floor for his body parts to float or to fly. So there you have it with Captain Buggy. Next we have oh no yeah next we have Sugar from the Dressrosa arc. Her limitation is her powers are melee, so she has to actually touch you for her powers to work. That's the main limitation. I mean, obviously you have the whole age thing, but in combat that's not the biggest issue, at least in my opinion. So let's assume Buggy fought against Sugar. No, let's not assume that. Let's assume character A and character B had the powers of Buggy and Sugar. A goes to Buggy, B goes to Sugar. Or let's say A and S for B and S for simplicity. So B for Buggy, S for Sugar. Now character B can fly around and dodge Sugar's attacks, and throw daggers at her or whatever range attack he wants to use. Character S for Sugar, she's in trouble because she can't touch character B. However, due to character B's limitation, character S only needs to touch character B's feet and get the W because he's a toy and all that. So that's just one example of how we can have what do you call it? How we can use limitations to determine who the winner would be because in this example, both fruits are fairly effective against each other. It's more of using the limitations against each other. Next, we have another two hacks characters. I was gonna talk about them individually, but after talking about Buggy versus Sugar, it's kind of fun. So I think I'll do this again for these two characters. So let's see two more hacks characters: Bartholomew Kuma, and Kizaru. There's a number of limitations for each character. So Kizaru is a light logger. There aren't many there isn't he doesn't really have any elemental weaknesses. So I think this is really appropriate for him to fight a character that simply, hacks as well or paramecia. So let's talk about Kuma first. Kuma's main limitation is his paws, which are his weapons. His powers are only work from his paws. With Sugar, she can use her elbows or whatever to touch you and turn you into a toy. But with Kuma, he needs to use his pads, his palms, his paws. I mean, yeah, his pads. Sorry, his pads, his palm, his palms rather, because it's both. Yeah, so that is a limitation, which means if you get rid of his palms in some form or some fashion, all of a sudden he's lost all his power. well, not all, but most of his power, because that's where he gets most of his powers from. Yeah, so that is a really big weakness. Another thing is to simply avoid getting touched, which again is a weakness. Next, let's look at another. Rather, it is a limitation. Sorry, let's look at another limitation, but this time we're looking at Kizaru's, because that really covers Kuma's limitations in terms of his power. Now, Kizaru's limitations are, I mean, we could look at the whole cyborg stuff, but we'll get to that if necessary. But I think we'll just focus on the double fruits for now. Let's assume, in fact, let's do what we did with Sugar and Buggy. Let's assume these are two separate people of equal strength using these two powers. B for Bartholomew Kuma and K for Kizaru. So we've talked about the limitations of Kuma's fruit, Bartholomew Kuma, and now we're going to talk about Kizaru's limitations, or the limitations of his fruit. So you might think that light is it is pretty hard. So, I can't even front. But there are some limitations. First of all, Kizaru does not move at the speed of light. Now you might be puzzled, but I think I'll save that discussion for another day because I don't want this video to be too long. In fact, it's already like 7 minutes. So let's move to the other limitations. Now, light only travels in straight lines. This means that if you have observation haki, you can predict where Kizaru is going, and you can get there ahead of him and attack him. Because like I said, he doesn't move at the speed of light. So you can't get there ahead of him, especially with observation haki and enough speed yourself, because with observation haki, having observation haki isn't good enough. You actually need to be fast to some extent, unless your observation haki is like super ridiculous. Then you can be 5 or 6 steps ahead of your opponent. But anyways, that's just one example. Yeah, he needs to be in a straight. He needs to move in straight lines, which is why he does that attack where he bounces off, where he shoots light that bounces off of surfaces, because he can't move in a straight line. So that's just one example of a weakness of Kizaru. A second weakness is, like I said, he doesn't move at the speed of light, and the main reason, I can go into this deeper, which I probably will in a separate video, but the main reason is he has start-up time and recovery time when he's traveling. Start-up time refers to the time it takes for him to turn from human form into light, to transform, and he has recovery time, because after he's transformed, he then travels at the speed of light. That's when he travels at the speed of light, when he has turned into light. Then he travels as light at the speed of light. Then he arrives at his location, and then he turns back from light into human form. And that transformation time, again, is his recovery time. So if you include his startup time and recovery time, which you should, then you can see that he isn't actually moving at the speed of light, because you have to include those, and he takes more time. Therefore, he isn't moving at the speed of light. So yeah, again, with that whole startup recovery time thing, that again gives you assistance with your, or at least it makes it a little more lenient for people with observation haki. It's not totally impossible to do things against Kizaru if you have, especially if you have observation haki. So let's say character B and K are fighting each other. If character B, well, assuming neither have observation haki, then it's gonna be really hard for character B to keep up with character K, because they're simply reacting, and character K is moving really fast. So I think the victory will probably go to character K. If they shoot enough lasers, character B can't defend everything, especially as a regular human. Like we said, we're using different characters, not the actual Kuma and Kizaru. So I think the victory will go to character K, which is the light fruit character. So that's just an example of how we can use limitations of double fruits to determine who the winner is. This is especially effective when it's a hacked double fruit, or a double fruit which seems like it doesn't have a weakness, but when you consider the limitations, you start finding strategies and tactics and different holes in the armor of said double fruits. I think I've covered this long enough, freaking 10 minutes. I apologize, but hopefully I've made this entertaining enough with the little fights. Now we're moving on to what was I saying? Effectiveness. Yes. So like I said, one thing with Kizaru's fruit is effectiveness. There isn't really any fruit or any elements that I can think of that he won't be effective against, apart from maybe darkness, which is what's his name, Blackbeard's fruit. So speaking of effectiveness, if you've played Pokemon, you know that water beats fire, fire beats grass. These are effective against each other, and some things are completely immune to each other, such as ground is completely immune to lightning attacks, or rather electric. Then you have steel is completely immune to poison. Similar things happen in One Piece. Non-living things are immune to poison. So what's his name? And ground is resistant to poison in Pokemon. So you have Mr. 3 versus Magellan. I think most of us can agree that Magellan should be stronger than Mr. 3. But since Mr. Three, but Magellan is the type of character who would rely on his devil fruit. And since Mr. Three has the wax fruit, he can create a barrier which nullifies all the poison. So technically, because poison only affects living things, and that's not acid, it's poison. So it does nothing against the wax. This means that Magellan basically doesn't have any fruit because poison needs to touch his opponent, and Mr. Three can nullify all of this. So obviously there's other characters that can do this. Other characters that can make inorganic matter can do this. Such as Akainu or Aokiji. But this was a good example because someone as weak as Mr. Three could do this, which just goes to show how important effectiveness is in this whole devil fruit combat situation. So like in Pokemon, if something is effective against another thing, so like fire versus water versus fire, you're gonna have double damage. Now this isn't exactly the case in One Piece, but with the Mr. Three Magellan thing, we see how like the tables turn from a weaker character being the person on top, Mr. Three, dominating over Magellan because of his powers. Now I don't think we didn't really see him like dominate Magellan. I don't even think they fought, but just that resistance alone, if it was put in like more capable hands, there could have been some really big problems for Magellan. Another example, and that was an example of devil fruit immunity because of this is beyond effectiveness. Effectiveness is zero, therefore there's a complete immunity. Another immunity we can have is NL and Luffy. In Pokemon, electric and ground, but in One Piece, electric and rubber. So and in One Piece, NL's fruit doesn't create heat apparently. So Luffy is completely resistant to NL's attacks, and this turns NL from god status to a common thug. Really, I mean, he's slightly stronger because he did take quite a number of blows and still stand up, but he dropped so low, like he was literally on some god level stuff, and he just dropped to typical thug level. So yeah, I think those are two good examples of immunities. But let's talk about something. No, I think one more, which is we'll go with Ace and Akainu. Now, normally with fire, you're supposed to be resistant to getting burnt. Oh, no, immune rather to getting burnt, which is a trait that comes with Ace's fruit. However, Ace can get burnt by Akainu's magma fruit. Now we don't know whether regular magma can burn Ace, but Akainu's magma fruit can burn Ace, whilst Akainu remains immune to burns from fire as well as Ace's fruit. And this property is what do you call it? Is what I refer to as superiority. So we can compare this to an arrow and a shotgun, or a slingshot and a bazooka. They both have like similar functions, but one is superior to the other, even though they're like in the same bracket of being ranged weapons. Yeah, and now we talk about just effectiveness. We've talked about 100% effectiveness. We've talked about effectiveness from like the same branch, which is like superiority. Now we'll talk about just less than 100% effectiveness, or less than 0% or more than 0% effectiveness, somewhere in between. So one example is Ace versus Aokiji. Now they didn't fight, they just had a clash, but in the clash Ace won, and the reason being ice beats fire. Now this doesn't make Aokiji weak. Just look at the whole Magellan versus Mr. 3 situation. Obviously this isn't as bad. I don't think it's as bad. Aokiji can probably do some damage to Ace still, possibly. I don't know, but I would assume so. However, it is what it is. Fire beats ice because fire melts the ice, and so once the ice turns into water, it's no longer ice. He has to refreeze it. So there is a little fire versus ice thing going on, but it isn't a surprise to most people because fire beats wax and all that kind of stuff. Which is another thing I need to talk about, which is environment. Now the thing with environment is it's not a big part for them. It's not a big deal for the most part. So I really don't think it's worth bringing up, but since I brought it up, I might as well cover it. So with environments, if you with Mr. Three's in a hot environment, his wax will melt, and therefore he's less effective, irrespective of your own devil fruit. So let's say you're a match for Mr. Three. If you're fighting in a hot environment, you should beat him unless you are also weak in the hot environment. I think I've covered pretty much everything in terms of effectiveness. Yep, I have. So yeah, with effectiveness, you have the whole hierarchy thing, the whole ladder thing, the pyramid thing, the superiority thing rather. Yeah, I think that's the best way to say it. The superiority thing going on. So you have the arrow versus bazooka situation. You have the effectiveness situation, which is a rock paper scissors situation. It's a Pokemon type of situation, and yeah, that's really how it goes down with effectiveness. And we talked about limitations in the beginning and how they're important, especially for hacks devil fruits. Now they're important for all devil fruits, but they're especially important for hacks devil fruits because without limitations, as you know, as I implied, they are hacks. So it's a rough journey, man. So that's it for this video. Really long video, but I hope this is some nice content for you guys and you enjoy this video. If you like this video, check out some of my other videos, some of my other theories. Don't forget to leave comments if you think I'm wrong or if you like have a suggestion or anything to say at all. That's pretty much it for this video, and once again, thank you guys for watching.